Jesus wept. I tried to stay away from reviews before I went in to see this movie, and just thought I'd check a couple before I started talking about this, and Christ, this film is tanking. I really must have missed something here though, because I'm about to tell you why this film's better than I expected. Morbius. This is a Sony-owned Marvel movie based off a villain from the Spider-Man comics who is basically Dracula, a devoted scientist who experiments on himself and it goes wrong and ends up with the powers of a vampire and must struggle with his inner urge to kill others while facing off against a similar foe. I really must have missed something here, although to be fair I came into this one with somewhat low expectations. I'm not a big fan of the two Venom movies we have to date, and it's definitely getting to the point where it feels like Sony should be handing over all their Marvel property back to Disney because Sony just doesn't know what to do with it anymore. Even with me not being a fan of Venom 1 or 2, it sold very well, so I'm guessing Sony thought, what other Spider-Man villains can we make a solo movie for because it sells? But I think the success Venom had was because A, it's Venom, and B, you had Tom Hardy at the helm. Here it's just a Dracula ripoff, and it's also Jared Leto, who I think a lot of people have very mixed feelings on, especially when he takes on roles which are a little bit more eccentric. For example, the Joker in Suicide Squad, or his character in House of Gucci. I don't really mind him that much, but personally I still went into this with some fairly low expectations. It's actually a somewhat well-rounded movie, and it's definitely better than Venom Let There Be Carnage. Okay, we should probably start off with the main man in question here, and that's Jared Leto. He does definitely play a somewhat duller performance. It's very Jekyll and Hyde here, where he's battling with his inner demons, and it's very far from that jokey Tom Hardy / MCU character role that we're used to seeing previously. I think for the most part though it works. I bought him as this dedicated scientist and I really enjoyed his transformation into this superhuman vampire. And the CG here, the visual effects, I think works really well. The trails you see coming off the back of him when he's going into superhuman speed and strength, I think it looks really fantastic on screen. And when it interchanges with slow motion for short intervals, I think it works really well and it was really entertaining. This is a little bit of spoiler territory going in here, but it's not really going to ruin it for you. But this does suffer the very typical thing we see in a lot of origin stories, which is the main villain is the exact same as our hero. Yeah, it's annoying and we've seen it 100 times, but this attempt here isn't any better or worse than ones we've seen before. In fact, I think the midpoint of this movie, a scene which takes place in this subway train station, was really good. This movie does suffer a lot with grayscaling, everything's very monochrome, the same colour, but this scene was very fast-paced, vibrant colours, and that was the thing. We could see snippets here and there of what this film could have been if it was constantly at its best. And I was really into it, but it just doesn't always maintain that high, unfortunately. And in particular, the final act, Act 3, just really falls flat on its face. It is a decently paced 2/3 of a movie, give or take 1 or 2 questionable edits, but then we get to Act 3 where it just doesn't work. A lot is attempted to be thrown at us emotionally to get us going, but none of it really lands. And where we had this great colourful action scene earlier, it's replaced with this dull, very grey, dark, hard to see mess, essentially, where the ending feels somewhat abrupt and then literally 2 seconds later it's the credits. The last bit just felt so rushed and so out of character with the pace that had been set in the previous 2 acts. And I think it's that bad taste, that last taste we had, which is what's making these critics slam it so much in their reviews. But to me it was a good foundation. Jared Leto is joined by Matt Smith, who I just love anyway, and I think if you're going to have anyone act as a counterpart to Jared Leto, he was a really good pick, and I think he does great with what he had here. There's also surprisingly a few good horror elements in here too. Again, midway through the movie, we get a really great scene which demonstrates the horror that could have been associated with this character. It's just a shame there's not too many examples of this to be seen. And the other supporting casts are fine, they're just there. But overall I feel like the story has more weight and it has more investment than either of the 2 Venom movies did. It lacks the comedy, which I think will turn a lot of people off for sure, but it hardcore commits into taking this story seriously. And personally, I'm fine with that. When a movie can pick a lane and fully commit, I prefer that than when it's trying to do 2 things at once and failing at both. Would I recommend this? It's less comical and does suffer from poor colouring and colour choices, and it does have the questionable editing that we've seen in a lot of Sony movies today, and that finale act is very weak. But it's got good foundation, has some great examples throughout the film of what this could have looked like if it was constantly at its best, and I would be happy to see more of this character. I think it's worth the watch, unless you really don't like Jared Leto or vampires. Maybe wait for streaming services if you're not 100% sure. But it really does not deserve the harsh words and the terrible reviews that I think it's getting online at the moment. But that's the world we live in, isn't it? Everything's either 100% amazing or 0% shit. But yeah, Morbius, are you going to go see it in cinemas? If you have and thought differently to what I did, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. If you found this review helpful, please leave a like and subscribe, it always helps me out. And as always, stay tuned for more reviews of movies, anime and video games. Until next time guys, take care. Bye bye.